I knew something was wrong the moment I was escorted to my table at my only daughter's wedding reception. The round table for 8 was tucked behind a large column near the kitchen entrance, as far from the main celebration as possible, while still technically being in the same ballroom. The place cards revealed I would be sharing the evening with distant acquaintances of my new son-in-law's family, people I had never met, whose names I'd never heard mentioned. Table 19, the exile table. Mrs. Montgomery, can I get you something to drink? Asked a server, the only person who had acknowledged my existence since I arrived. White wine, please, I replied, smoothing the skirt of my navy blue dress, elegant but understated, purchased specifically for this occasion. I'd spent more than I usually would on myself, wanting to look appropriate for my only child's wedding, despite our recent tensions. As I waited for the other guests to arrive at my relegated corner, I observed the opulence surrounding me. The Rosewood Hotel's grand ballroom had been transformed into a scene from a luxury magazine spread. Thousands of white orchids and roses cascaded from crystal chandeliers, custom-made silk linens draped the tables, and a 10-piece orchestra played softly from a raised platform. The champagne alone must have cost more than my first car. All of it precisely as Olivia had demanded and expected me to fund. Mother refused to contribute properly to the wedding. I had overheard her telling her maid of honor at the rehearsal dinner last night, not bothering to lower her voice. Can you believe it? After all Dad left her, James had to tap into our honeymoon fund to cover the difference. What Olivia had considered refusing to contribute properly had actually been my offer of $25,000, a generous sum from my teacher's pension, I thought, rather than the $150,000 she and James had requested for their extravaganza. My suggestion that they scale back their plans to something more reasonable had been met with incredulity. Mother, this is Boston. James is a Whitman. We have standards to maintain, she had declared, as if I were suggesting they get married in a fast food restaurant rather than merely opt for seasonal flowers and one less course at dinner. My wine arrived just as the other occupants of table 19 began to appear. An elderly great-uncle of James, who was hard of hearing, 2 former colleagues of James's father who seemed uncertain why they had been invited, and 3 distant cousins who spent the evening talking exclusively to each other in rapid-fire Italian. The 8th seat remained conspicuously empty. As dinner was served, I watched Olivia circulate among the prominent tables, radiant in her designer gown, laughing and posing for photographs with James's banking colleagues, her fashionable friends, and Boston's social elite. She had not visited my table once, not even for the obligatory mother-of-the-bride greeting that etiquette would demand. "Beautiful wedding," commented one of James's father's colleagues, Harrison or Harold. I couldn't recall which. "You must be very proud." "Yes," I replied simply, unwilling to elaborate on the complicated emotions swirling beneath my composed exterior. "Olivia mentioned you're a retired school teacher?" he continued, clearly making polite conversation to fill the awkward silence at our table. Before I could correct him, I had been a university professor of economics, not a school teacher. A commotion near the head table caught everyone's attention. The best man was tapping his glass, calling for attention for the toasts. James's father spoke first, his voice booming with confidence born of wealth and privilege. When James brought Olivia home to meet us, I knew immediately she would fit perfectly into the Whitman family. Ambitious, accomplished, and absolutely stunning, just like her new mother-in-law, he added, raising his glass to his wife, who beamed from the head table. Polite laughter rippled through the room. I took another sip of wine, reminding myself that I was here for Olivia, despite everything. The maid of honor spoke next, gushing about Olivia and James's perfect partnership and their enviable lifestyle. Then the best man, followed by James's grandfather. Each toast celebrated the couple's accomplishments, their beautiful home in Beacon Hill, their promising careers, their matched ambition. Not once did anyone mention love. As the formal program ended and dancing began, I decided to make one attempt to connect with my daughter on her wedding day. I approached the head table during a moment when she was relatively alone, her new husband having been pulled onto the dance floor by his mother. "Olivia," I said softly, "the ceremony was beautiful. You look radiant." She turned, her expression cooling as she registered my presence. "Mother, I'm surprised you found your way up here from the back." The barbs stung, but I maintained my smile. "I wanted to congratulate you properly." And to give you this, I handed her a small envelope, not a check, as she might have expected, but a letter I had written expressing my hopes for her marriage and sharing some wisdom from my own 30-year union with her father. She took it with barely concealed disappointment, tucking it into a pile of gift envelopes without opening it. "Thank you for coming. I should circulate." As she moved to step past me, I gently touched her arm. "Olivia, I know things have been strained between us lately, but you're my only child and I love you. I hope we can move forward now that the wedding stress is behind us." Something flickered in her eyes, perhaps a moment of genuine connection, but it was quickly replaced by a hardness I had come to recognize in recent years. "Yes, well, if you had just helped with the wedding as any normal mother would, there wouldn't have been any strain, would there?" Before I could respond, one of James's aunts approached, clearly eager to speak with the bride. Olivia immediately brightened, her social mask sliding back into place. "Aunt Catherine, I'm so glad you could come all the way from London," she gushed, effectively dismissing me. I retreated to my isolated table, where the Italian cousins were now arguing about soccer while the elderly great-uncle had fallen asleep. As I sipped my wine, I observed the celebration continuing without me, the mother of the bride rendered invisible by her daughter's embarrassment over my perceived financial shortcomings. What Olivia didn't know, what I had kept private since her father's death 7 years ago, was that I was far from the struggling widow she assumed me to be. Robert had left me well insured, yes, but it was what I had done with those resources that would have shocked her. Years of teaching economics had given me insights that few possessed, and I had quietly built a real estate portfolio that generated more monthly income than Olivia and James earned combined. My apparent frugality wasn't born of necessity, but of values. Values I had clearly failed to instill in my only child. A burst of laughter drew my attention back to the center of the room. Olivia was now surrounded by a group of her friends, gesturing in my direction with a champagne flute in hand. Though I couldn't hear her words, their expressions, pitying glances, poorly concealed smirks, told me everything I needed to know. I was being discussed, mocked. Confirmation came moments later when one of the younger servers approached with an unexpected glass of champagne. "Compliments of the Whitmans," she said kindly. "And please don't worry about the bill rumors. My mom went through bankruptcy too, and she came out okay." "I beg your pardon?" I asked, genuinely confused. The young woman's face flushed. "Oh, I'm sorry. I thought the bride mentioned you'd had some financial troubles, that you couldn't contribute to the wedding because of banking issues and debt. I shouldn't have said anything." A cold realization washed over me. Olivia wasn't just isolating me at the wedding. She was actively spreading lies about my financial situation to explain why her mother wasn't seated with the family, why I hadn't funded her extravagant demands. I thanked the server and excused myself to the ladies' room, needing a moment to collect my thoughts. In the elegant marble restroom, I stood before the mirror, studying my reflection. At 68, I still resembled the woman Robert had fallen in love with 40 years earlier. Silver hair now instead of brown, laugh lines around my eyes, but the same straight posture and clear gaze. The face of a woman who had loved, lost, rebuilt, and discovered her own strength. Not the face of someone who deserved public humiliation from her own child. As I reapplied my lipstick, the bathroom door swung open and 3 of Olivia's friends entered, their conversation halting abruptly when they noticed me. They exchanged glances, then continued to the mirrors, their voices dropping to theatrical whispers. "Can you believe the situation with Olivia's mom? So sad." "I know. Apparently she lost everything in some online scam. Olivia's been helping her pay rent for months. God, how embarrassing. No wonder she hid her at table 19. Their words, meant for me to overhear, confirmed my suspicions. I met their gazes in the mirror, holding each one a beat longer than comfortable, then calmly gathered my clutch and exited without a word. Their reflected expressions, surprise mingled with shame, gave me the first moment of satisfaction I'd felt all evening. Back in the ballroom, the celebration continued in full swing. The cake had been cut in my absence, another traditional moment from which I'd been excluded. Olivia and James were now opening the dance floor, swaying to their chosen song as photographers captured every angle. I returned to table 19, where the Italian cousins had departed, and only the sleeping great-uncle remained. From this vantage point, I could observe without participating, invisible, yet seeing everything. including the moment when James's mother leaned in to whisper something to Olivia, both of them glancing in my direction before dissolving into conspiratorial laughter. Something shifted inside me then, a lifetime of accommodating, understanding, and making excuses for my daughter's increasingly self-centered behavior crystallizing into perfect clarity. This wasn't just wedding stress or youthful self-absorption. This was deliberate cruelty, a public attempt to diminish me to elevate herself. I had raised her better than this, or at least, I had tried to. As the evening wore on, I maintained my dignity, smiling pleasantly whenever anyone approached my table, declining invitations to dance, and observing the celebration with the detached interest of an anthropologist studying an unfamiliar culture, the culture of excess, of appearance over substance, of status over connection. Shortly before midnight, as the party showed no signs of winding down, I decided it was time to leave. I wrote a brief note on a napkin for the great-uncle, who was still sleeping soundly in case he woke and wondered about my absence. Then I quietly made my way toward the exit, stopping only to leave my gift, a family heirloom brooch that had belonged to my grandmother, with the gift attendant. At the doorway, I paused for one last look at my daughter, now laughing in the center of a circle of admiring friends, champagne in hand, radiant in the glow of attention. She hadn't noticed my departure, just as she hadn't acknowledged my presence for most of the evening. Outside, the cool Boston night air felt cleansing after hours in the overheated ballroom. As my Uber arrived, I made a decision that would change everything, not out of vengeance, but out of self-respect and a mother's responsibility to correct a child's grievous error, even an adult child. "Good evening," I said to the driver. "Could you take me to the Four Seasons, please?" He raised an eyebrow. "Not going home, ma'am?" "No," I replied calmly. "I have some business to attend to tonight." As we pulled away from the Rosewood, I removed my phone from my clutch and opened my email. The draft I had prepared earlier in the week, just in case, waited for my final decision. After tonight, there was no longer any doubt about what needed to be done. My finger hovered over the screen for only a moment before I pressed send. By morning, every guest at my daughter's wedding would know the truth, not just about my financial situation, but about the woman they had celebrated today, and the mother she had chosen to humiliate for the sake of saving face. Sometimes, lessons in respect came at a high price. Tomorrow, Olivia would begin paying hers. I slept surprisingly well that night in my suite at the Four Seasons. Perhaps it was the emotional exhaustion of maintaining dignity through hours of calculated exclusion, or perhaps it was the certainty that, by morning, the scales would begin to balance. Either way, I woke to Boston's early light filtering through designer curtains, feeling more resolute than I had in years. My phone had been on Do Not Disturb overnight, but when I checked it at 7 a.m., the notifications confirmed that my email had created precisely the earthquake I'd anticipated. 12 missed calls from Olivia, 8 from James, 3 from his mother, Patricia. Dozens of text messages and emails ranging from apologetic to outraged. I ordered breakfast from room service, something I rarely indulged in, not from financial necessity, but from the habitual frugality that had helped build my fortune. As I sipped excellent coffee and watched morning activity on Boston Common below, I reread the message I had sent to every guest on the wedding list, courtesy of the contact information in the digital program that had been so thoughtfully provided on the wedding website. Dear friends and family, I hope you enjoyed celebrating Olivia and James's wedding yesterday. As mother of the bride, I found it an illuminating experience, particularly discovering the creative narrative my daughter shared about my financial circumstances to explain my seating placement and absence from traditional mother-of-the-bride moments. In the interest of clarity, I feel compelled to correct some misinformation that was actively circulated during the reception. I am not bankrupt. I am not in debt. I have never fallen victim to online scams, nor am I dependent on Olivia for housing assistance. Following my husband Robert's death 7 years ago, I utilized my economics background to build a real estate investment portfolio currently valued at approximately $16.2 million. I manage properties across 3 states and serve as a silent partner in 4 successful development projects in Boston, including the Waterfront Tower, where James's firm maintains its offices. My refusal to fund a $150,000 wedding was not born of inability, but of principle, a distinction that appears increasingly important to clarify. For those associated with the Hamilton Foundation, you may be interested to learn that the anonymous donor who has funded the Empowerment Through Education initiative for the past 5 years, the program my daughter has built her career managing, is me. I chose anonymity not from shame, but from the belief that charitable works should be motivated by purpose rather than recognition. I share this not to embarrass, but to correct a public narrative created at my expense. While I regret any discomfort this causes, I believe truth matters, a value I tried to instill in my daughter. I wish Olivia and James happiness in their marriage and hope they discover that genuine fulfillment comes from character rather than appearances, from connection rather than status. With sincerity, Catherine Montgomery, PhD mother of the bride, rereading it now, I wondered briefly if I had gone too far. But the memory of that young server's pitying expression, of Olivia's friends whispering in the bathroom, of being deliberately excluded from every meaningful moment of my only child's wedding day while being actively maligned, these recollections reinforced my decision. Some lessons could only be taught through consequences. My phone rang again. Olivia, for the 13th time. I decided it was time to answer. Hello, Olivia. How could you? Her voice vibrated with fury and what sounded like tears. Do you have any idea what you've done? People have been calling us all morning. James's parents are livid. I simply corrected misinformation that you chose to spread, I replied calmly. Would you have preferred I continue to allow your lies to stand unchallenged? They weren't lies. They were simplifications. To protect you. To protect me? I couldn't keep the incredulity from my voice. By telling people I was bankrupt, that I needed your financial help for housing? In what universe is that protection, Olivia? You don't understand how these people work, she insisted. Status matters. If they knew my mother could have contributed but chose not to, it would have reflected badly on me, on us. And having a supposedly bankrupt mother seated in the back corner didn't reflect badly? That garnered sympathy, not judgment, she exclaimed, revealing a calculation that stunned me even after everything. People admired me for including you despite your circumstances. The breathtaking selfishness of her reasoning momentarily silenced me. When had my bright, compassionate daughter transformed into this person who viewed her own mother as a social liability to be managed? Where are you anyway? She demanded. James's mother has been trying to reach you. She wants an emergency family meeting to discuss damage control. I'm at the Four Seasons, I replied, and I have no interest in damage control. The truth requires none. A sharp intake of breath. The Four Seasons? You criticized my wedding budget, but you're staying at the Four Seasons? I own controlling interest in the management company, I informed her quietly. The suite is complimentary. Another silence, this one longer and heavier. Why didn't you tell me? Her voice had shifted, the anger now underlaid with genuine confusion. All these years, why keep it secret? Your investments, the foundation donations. Why, Mom? The question was valid, if belated. I gazed out at the park below, gathering my thoughts. When your father died, you were just starting your career. I didn't want you to become dependent on an inheritance that might prevent you from building your own life. As I saw success with my investments, I decided to continue that approach. I paused. And truthfully, Olivia, I wanted to be valued for who I am, not what I possess. A desire you of all people should understand after yesterday. That's not fair, she protested, but weakly. Perhaps not, I acknowledged, but neither was your treatment of me at your wedding. Neither were the lies you told about me to save face with people whose opinions apparently matter more than our relationship. James is furious, she said after a moment, changing tactics. His family is humiliated. You've damaged his professional reputation. I corrected falsehoods. If the truth damages his reputation, perhaps that reveals more about the foundation it was built upon than my decision to speak it. A muffled conversation on her end, James's voice in the background, tense and insistent. We need to meet, Olivia said finally, to discuss how to move forward from this situation you've created. I'm available for lunch tomorrow, I offered. Alone, Olivia. Just you and me. This is between mother and daughter, not the Whitman family enterprise. Another muffled exchange, then, fine. Tomorrow at 1, Four Seasons restaurant. She hung up without goodbye. I set down my phone and returned to my cooling coffee, feeling oddly peaceful despite the storm I had unleashed. For 7 years since Robert's death, I had diminished myself to accommodate Olivia's growing materialism and status anxiety. I had watched silently as the values we had tried to instill, integrity, compassion, authenticity, were gradually replaced by the pursuit of appearances and social position. Yesterday's humiliation had simply been the culmination of a transformation long in progress. My phone chimed with a text from an unexpected source. "Mrs. Montgomery, this is Eleanor Whitman, James's grandmother. I would very much appreciate the opportunity to speak with you privately. What happened to you yesterday was unconscionable. Some of us still value character over currency." I smiled slightly at this surprising ally. Perhaps there were still people in my daughter's new world who understood the difference between price and value after all. Eleanor Whitman was exactly as I remembered from our brief introduction at the rehearsal dinner. Elegant, observant, and possessed of the quiet confidence that comes from genuine rather than purchased refinement. Unlike her daughter-in-law, Patricia's studied sophistication, Eleanor's poise seemed effortless, earned through decades of actual living rather than social positioning. We met in the quiet corner of the Four Seasons Lounge that morning, away from the curious glances that had followed me since I entered. Word traveled quickly in Boston's upper circles, and my email had apparently provided the most interesting post-wedding gossip in recent memory. "Catherine," Eleanor greeted me, taking both my hands in hers. "Thank you for agreeing to meet. I imagine your morning has been rather eventful." "That's one way to describe it," I replied, settling into the chair across from her. "I appreciate you reaching out." The server appeared, and Eleanor ordered tea for both of us with the casual authority of someone accustomed to being heard the first time. When he departed, she fixed me with a direct gaze. "First, let me say that your treatment yesterday was shameful. I observed much of it and regret not intervening. Family politics can make cowards of us all sometimes." "Thank you," I said simply, touched by her candor. "Second," she continued, "your email was masterfully composed, direct without being vindictive, revelatory without being tawdry. I found myself admiring your restraint, considering the provocation." I smiled despite myself. "I went through several drafts. The first few were considerably less restrained." A answering smile creased her face. "I can only imagine. Now I suspect you're wondering why James's grandmother is sitting here, essentially complimenting you on publicly embarrassing her family." The thought had crossed my mind. Eleanor sighed, her expression growing serious. "Catherine, I've been watching James's relationship with your daughter with increasing concern. My grandson has many fine qualities, but his parents raised him to value acquisition over character, status over substance. In Olivia, he found someone equally focused on appearances and advancement." The tea arrived, providing a momentary pause in our conversation. After the server departed, Eleanor continued, her voice lower. "When I saw how they treated you, the mother of the bride, for God's sake, I recognized a pattern I've observed developing in James for years. The willingness to discard people who don't serve his aspirations." She stirred her tea precisely. "Patricia and William have encouraged this tendency, I'm afraid. They view relationships as strategic alliances rather than emotional connections. And Olivia has adopted this perspective," I noted, the pain of this reality still fresh. Eleanor nodded. "Quite thoroughly, it seems, but your email has created what might be a valuable disruption. An opportunity for course correction, perhaps." "I didn't send it to create family therapy opportunities," I admitted. "I simply refused to have my reputation maligned." "As you should," Eleanor agreed firmly. "But consequences often serve multiple purposes. Your daughter and my grandson have been permitted to behave unconscionably without repercussion for too long. This morning, several of William's banking colleagues contacted him about your real estate holdings. Patricia's social circle is buzzing with speculation about the Hamilton Foundation revelation. For the first time, they're facing genuine social discomfort of their own making." I sipped my tea, considering her words. "You don't seem particularly troubled by their discomfort." "I love my grandson, Catherine, but I don't love what he's becoming." Her gaze was steady. "Sometimes the greatest act of love is allowing natural consequences to occur, rather than cushioning every fall." The wisdom in her words resonated deeply. Wasn't that precisely what I had failed to do with Olivia in recent years? Challenging her superficial values would have created conflict, so I had retreated instead, watching silently as she drifted further from the woman I had raised her to be. "What happens now?" I asked. "That depends largely on you," Eleanor replied. "Patricia is organizing what she calls a family response strategy. William is concerned about business implications, given your financial connections to projects involving his firm. James is furious about perceived damage to his professional reputation." She paused, "but none of them seems particularly concerned about the moral dimension of having deliberately humiliated you." "And Olivia?" I couldn't help asking. Torn, I think, between defending her actions and recognizing their indefensibility. Eleanor's expression softened. "She's not entirely lost, Catherine. Misguided, certainly. Caught up in values that won't ultimately serve her. But beneath the carefully curated exterior, your daughter still exists." The observation brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "I want to believe that. You're meeting with her tomorrow?" I nodded. "Lunch here. She wanted to bring James and his parents. I insisted on seeing her alone." "Wise," Eleanor approved. "The Whitmans are masterful at controlling narratives." Together, they would overwhelm the conversation. She reached across the table, her aged hand covering mine in a gesture of surprising solidarity. "Catherine, may I offer some unsolicited advice from someone who has observed wealth destroy more promising young people than it has helped? Please, don't rescue them from this. Not financially, not socially, not emotionally." Her gaze was unwavering. "The greatest gift you can give Olivia now is the opportunity to recognize what truly matters. That process begins with facing the consequences of prioritizing appearance over integrity." As our meeting concluded, Eleanor handed me a small embossed card with her private number. "I found myself with fewer true peers as I've aged," she said. "Women who understand that character outvalues currency are increasingly rare in my social circle. I would welcome your company for tea again, regardless of how family dramas unfold." I tucked the card into my purse, unexpectedly moved by this alliance. "I'd like that very much." After Eleanor departed, I remained in the lounge, contemplating our conversation. My phone continued to accumulate notifications, messages from wedding guests expressing everything from support to shock, former colleagues connecting the dots between my academic expertise and my investment success, even a call from the Hamilton Foundation's board chairman requesting an urgent meeting. Most tellingly, a text arrived from James. "We need to discuss business implications before your lunch with Olivia tomorrow. My firm's relationship with waterfront development could be affected by family matters. Please call at your convenience." No mention of how I had been treated. No acknowledgement of his role in the public lies. Just concern about financial implications. Eleanor's assessment of her grandson's priorities appeared sadly accurate. I deleted his message without responding and turned my attention to a new email. This one from the young server who had offered me sympathy for my non-existent bankruptcy. "Mrs. Montgomery, I'm so embarrassed about what I said at the wedding. I believed what the bride told us during staff briefing. Your email was an inspiration. My mom really did face financial hardship and rebuilt her life. I'm studying economics at UMass Boston and would love to hear more about your investment approach sometime. Respectfully, Zoe Martinez." This message, I answered immediately, offering to meet for coffee the following week. In the midst of family upheaval, the opportunity to mentor a young woman with authentic interest in financial independence felt like a gift, a reminder that good could emerge from even painful situations. As evening approached, I declined dinner invitations from several suddenly attentive acquaintances and ordered room service instead. Tomorrow's conversation with Olivia would require all my emotional resources. Tonight was for preparation, reflection, and the quiet certainty that after decades of accommodating others, I had finally, definitively stood up for myself. And regardless of what happened next, that alone represented a victory worth savoring. The Four Seasons restaurant hummed with lunchtime conversation, elegant patrons dining beneath crystal chandeliers, while impeccable servers moved silently between tables. I arrived 15 minutes early, selecting a corner table that offered both privacy and a view of the entrance. The maitre d' had greeted me with particular deference, the email revelation of my ownership stake clearly having made its way through staff channels. I wore a simple but beautifully tailored navy dress, the same one I'd been wearing when Olivia last commented that I should update my wardrobe to something from this century. Its classic lines had outlasted a dozen fleeting trends, much like the values I had tried to instill in my daughter. At precisely 1:05, Olivia appeared at the restaurant entrance. Even from a distance, I could see the strain beneath her perfect exterior. Her posture, normally confident to the point of arrogance, seemed slightly hunched, as if bracing against invisible headwinds. She spotted me immediately but paused to compose herself before approaching, adjusting her expression like adjusting a garment. "Mother," she said coolly, taking the seat across from me. Up close, the evidence of a sleepless night was more apparent. Carefully concealed shadows beneath her eyes, a tightness around her mouth. "Olivia," I replied evenly. "Thank you for coming." A server appeared instantly. Olivia ordered a gin martini despite the early hour. I requested sparkling water with lime. The contrast seemed symbolic somehow. Once alone again, my daughter wasted no time on pleasantries. "We need to discuss how to mitigate the damage you've caused," she began, her voice low but intense. "James's father has received calls from 3 board members about your involvement in waterfront development. His mother had to resign from chairing the hospital gala because people are questioning her integrity after how you were treated at the wedding. The foundation director has requested an emergency meeting with me about the anonymous donation revelation." I listened without interrupting, noting her use of "damage you've caused" rather than "damage we caused by lying about you." Still deflecting responsibility, still centering herself as the victim. "James thinks we should issue a joint statement," she continued, checking her phone briefly. "Something about family misunderstandings being regrettably made public. His PR team has drafted language that acknowledges your financial status while explaining that cultural differences between generations led to unfortunate miscommunications." "Cultural differences between generations," I repeated slowly. "Is that how we're characterizing deliberate lies and public humiliation now?" Her eyes flashed. "You could have addressed this privately, Mother. Instead, you chose to embarrass us in front of everyone we know." "Just as you chose to embarrass me in front of everyone I know," I countered calmly. "The difference being that my assertions were factual, while yours were fabrications." The martini arrived, and Olivia took a substantial sip before responding. "I was trying to salvage an impossible situation. You refused to contribute appropriately to the wedding. What was I supposed to tell people? The truth, perhaps?" I suggested. "That your mother offered $25,000 but declined to fund the additional $125,000 you requested for extravagances? That despite being perfectly capable of hosting a lovely wedding within reasonable parameters, you and James insisted on a showcase that required my financial subsidy to achieve?" She flinched slightly at hearing the situation stated so plainly. "You don't understand how important this wedding was for our position in certain circles. James's parents expected a statement event. And your mother's dignity was an acceptable sacrifice for that statement?" I asked quietly. Something flickered in her eyes, the first hint of genuine discomfort with her actions. But it disappeared quickly behind familiar defensiveness. "You've never cared about social position," she said dismissively. "You don't understand what's at stake." "I understand perfectly what's at stake, Olivia. Your values, your character, the person you're becoming." I leaned forward slightly. "And I bear significant responsibility for not confronting these concerns sooner." This seemed to catch her off guard. "What does that mean?" "It means I've watched for years as you've gradually prioritized appearance over substance, status over connection, acquisition over meaning. I've remained silent while you've embraced values entirely contrary to those your father and I tried to instill." I met her gaze directly. "My silence enabled your transformation, and for that, I apologize." "Apologize?" She looked genuinely confused. "You're the one who humiliated us with that email." "No, Olivia. I corrected falsehoods you deliberately spread. The humiliation came from your own actions being exposed, not from my response to them." I paused as our server approached to take lunch orders. Olivia waved him away impatiently, her martini apparently sufficient. "I'll have the salmon salad," I told him, maintaining the basic courtesy Olivia had dismissed. When he departed, I continued. "What troubles me most isn't that you seated me at a distant table or excluded me from traditional mother-of-the-bride moments. It's that you invented financial failures to explain my treatment, using my supposed hardship as a social tool rather than acknowledging your own choices. It was just easier. It was cruel," I interrupted, my voice firm but not unkind. and beneath the woman I raised you to be. For the first time, Olivia seemed without immediate retort. She stared into her martini, avoiding my gaze. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked finally, her voice smaller. "About the investments, the foundation donations, any of it." It was the same question she'd asked on the phone, but now it seemed genuinely puzzled rather than accusatory. "Would it have mattered?" I asked gently. "Would knowing I had wealth have made you value my perspective more, respect my choices, include me more fully in your life?" She didn't answer, which was itself an answer. "I kept my financial situation private for many reasons," I continued. "Initially to ensure you built your own career rather than relying on inheritance. Later, as I observed your increasing focus on wealth as a measure of worth, I wanted any relationship between us to be based on genuine connection, not what I could provide materially. And the anonymous foundation donations? That was my program, Mother, my career development, which you built with genuine skill," I acknowledged. "I funded it because I believed in its mission and your ability to execute it effectively. I remained anonymous because I wanted you to receive full professional credit for its success without suggestions of maternal favoritism." This gave her pause. For a moment, I glimpsed the daughter I remembered, thoughtful, capable of nuance, able to consider perspectives beyond her own immediate interests. "James wants to meet with you about the waterfront development project," she said finally, changing tactics. "He's concerned about investment implications if family tensions affect business relationships." "I imagine he is," I replied neutrally. "He thinks." She stopped herself, something shifting in her expression. "Actually, he's been quite focused on the financial aspects since your email. He's mentioned your investment portfolio several times, asked detailed questions about our potential inheritance." The observation hung between us, Olivia seemingly processing its implications in real time. "How interesting," I said softly, watching realization dawn in my daughter's eyes. "That's not—" "He's just being practical," she insisted, but with less conviction than before. My lunch arrived, the conversation pausing momentarily. When the server departed, I regarded my daughter thoughtfully. "Olivia, I won't be issuing any joint statements. I won't be meeting with James about business implications, and I won't be manufacturing a convenient narrative to spare the Whitmans social discomfort they brought upon themselves." I picked up my fork. "What I will do is continue to live according to my values, which include honesty, dignity, and the radical notion that people should be treated with respect regardless of their perceived financial utility." She flinched at the precision of this last point, its arrow finding its mark. "So what happens now?" she asked, an edge of anxiety creeping into her voice. "That," I said gently, "depends entirely on you." The week following my lunch with Olivia unfolded in unexpected ways. The Hamilton Foundation Board unanimously voted to name their flagship education initiative after me, despite my protests that anonymity had been my preference. 3 different women's business organizations reached out with speaking invitations. The Boston Globe financial section requested an interview about stealth wealth and female investment strategies. Most surprisingly, James's father's firm initiated formal proceedings to dissolve their partnership in the waterfront development project, citing unforeseen conflicts of interest. Their lawyers seemed genuinely shocked when my legal team responded with gracious acquiescence and a generous buyout offer that would cost them significantly more than maintaining the partnership. "They expected you to fight it," Gordon, my attorney, explained during our review meeting. "Probably hoped to leverage family connections to pressure you into unfavorable terms." "They don't know me very well," I observed. "No," Gordon agreed with a smile. "They certainly don't." Amidst these professional ripples, silence from Olivia. 5 days had passed since our lunch, with no calls, no texts, no further attempts to extract a family statement or business concessions. I had expected anger, continued demands, perhaps even threats. The complete absence of communication was both concerning and intriguing. On the 6th day, a text arrived from Eleanor Whitman. "Significant developments in the family situation. Available for tea this afternoon?" We met again in the Four Seasons Lounge, which was becoming our unofficial conference room. Eleanor looked tired but resolute as she settled across from me. "James and Olivia have separated," she announced without preamble. "She's moved into a hotel for the time being." Though surprised by the speed of this development, I couldn't claim complete shock. "What happened?" Several things, apparently. Eleanor signaled for tea before continuing. After your lunch, Olivia returned home to find James and his parents strategizing about how to leverage the Montgomery connection in light of your financial revelations. According to my housekeeper, who heard it from Patricia's housekeeper, they were discussing ways to ensure access to your estate planning, with particular focus on adjusting the waterfront development arrangement to their advantage. My stomach tightened with anger, not for myself, but for Olivia. They were plotting financial strategies while she was meeting with me about family reconciliation? Eleanor nodded grimly. It seems your email revealing your financial position transformed Olivia overnight from a social asset to a potential wealth conduit in their eyes. Not particularly subtle about it either. How did Olivia respond? From what I gather, she initially joined their planning session. Old habits, I suppose. Eleanor's expression softened slightly. But something shifted during the conversation. William made a comment about ensuring the Montgomery assets remain accessible regardless of sentimental complications. James apparently agreed that family feelings shouldn't interfere with strategic opportunities. I winced at the callousness. And this bothered Olivia? It appears to have triggered what my late husband would have called a moment of damned clarity. Eleanor accepted her tea with a nod to the server. She realized they were discussing you, her mother, as an asset to be managed rather than a relationship to be repaired. Moreover, she recognized that same clinical assessment might eventually be applied to her if circumstances changed. I absorbed this information slowly, cautious about allowing hope to overshadow judgment. Where is she now? The Four Seasons, actually. At my startled look, Eleanor added, "Not here, the one on the harbor." She didn't want to risk encountering you before she'd figured things out, according to my sources. Your intelligence network is impressive, I observed. When you reach my age, people tend to speak freely in your presence, assuming diminished hearing or attention. A mischievous smile played at her lips. I've never bothered to correct this misapprehension. We sipped our tea in companionable silence for a moment, before Eleanor continued. Catherine, I've known the Whitman family for over 50 years. William and Patricia have built their entire existence around acquisition of wealth, position, connections. They raised James to view relationships as transactions, marriage as a merger. Her gaze was direct. Your daughter has been immersed in this value system for years, reinforced by a social circle that operates on the same principles. What happened at the wedding, her treatment of you, was abhorrent, but not entirely surprising given the environment she's chosen. You're suggesting I should be more understanding? I asked, uncertain of her direction. Not at all. I'm suggesting that her current separation, her apparent moment of recognition, represents a potential inflection point. Eleanor set down her cup with precision. The question is whether this realization is temporary discomfort or the beginning of genuine reassessment. I considered this thoughtfully. And how would you determine the difference? Actions, not words, Eleanor replied promptly. Apologies are easy. Changed behavior is the only reliable evidence of changed perspective. Her wisdom resonated deeply. How often had Olivia offered perfectly crafted apologies over the years without subsequent adjustment to her behavior? The polished, "I'm sorry you felt that way," that placed responsibility on others' perceptions rather than her own actions. What would you do in my position? I asked, valuing Eleanor's perspective in a way I hadn't anticipated when we first connected. She considered the question with appropriate gravity. I would wait. Allow her to make the next move without prompting or pressure. The path she chooses when not influenced by external expectations will tell you everything you need to know about her internal recalibration. As our meeting concluded, Eleanor surprised me with a gentle hug. Family wounds cut deepest, she said quietly, but they also hold the greatest potential for meaningful healing. Whatever happens, remember, you've done something essential. You've stood in your truth with dignity. Back in my suite, I found myself drawn to old photo albums I'd brought from home. Pictures of Olivia as a child, her gap-toothed smile radiating uncomplicated joy. Images of family camping trips where her delight in simple pleasures shone in every snapshot. Robert teaching her to ride a bicycle. My own younger self bandaging skinned knees with kisses. When had acquisition replaced connection as her primary value? When had approval from others eclipsed authentic self-expression? Had I truly done everything possible to counter these shifts, or had I retreated from conflict, allowing external influences to reshape my child without sufficient challenge? The questions offered no easy answers, but their examination felt necessary. A mother's reckoning with both her daughter's choices and her own. My phone chimed with a text from an unfamiliar number. "Mrs. Montgomery, this is Zoe Martinez from the wedding. Just wanted to thank you for coffee yesterday and the reading recommendations. My economics professor was impressed when I mentioned your investment approach in class discussion. You've given me a new perspective on what's possible for women in finance. Thank you." The message provided unexpected balm, a reminder that even painful experiences could yield positive outcomes beyond their immediate circumstances. Perhaps the public revelation of my financial acumen and the circumstances that prompted it would inspire other women to recognize their own potential, to value substance over appearance, authenticity over approval. As evening fell over Boston, I made a decision. I would return home tomorrow rather than extending my hotel stay. Whatever came next with Olivia, reconciliation or continued estrangement, would unfold in its own time. Meanwhile, I had a life to live, projects to manage, new connections like Zoe to nurture, and a voice I had reclaimed too completely to silence again. The path forward remained uncertain, but for the first time in years, I faced that uncertainty from a position of complete self-possession. No longer diminished by my daughter's assessment, no longer accommodating values I didn't share. And in that clarity, I found an unexpected peace. 3 weeks passed without communication from Olivia. I returned to my daily routines, managing my investment properties, reviewing quarterly reports, attending board meetings for the various charitable organizations I supported. The furor over my post-wedding email gradually subsided, replaced by a different kind of attention focused on my business acumen rather than family drama. The Boston Business Journal published a profile titled "The Invisible Investor: How Catherine Montgomery Built a Real Estate Empire in Plain Sight." The Women's Foundation of Massachusetts invited me to keynote their annual fundraising gala. 3 different universities requested guest lectures for their economics and business programs. I accepted some invitations, declined others, and found myself unexpectedly energized by the opportunity to share insights I had kept private for so long. Decades of observing markets, identifying undervalued properties, and patiently building wealth had given me expertise worth passing on, particularly to women who had been conditioned to believe financial strategy was beyond their capacity. "You've become quite the celebrity," Gordon observed during our monthly portfolio review. "How does it feel to step out from behind the curtain?" "Surprisingly comfortable," I admitted, though I could do without the occasional society photographers outside my favorite restaurants. He chuckled. "Fame has its drawbacks. Speaking of which, have you heard anything from Olivia?" "No." I kept my tone neutral, despite the pang this admission still caused. "Eleanor says she's still at the Harbor Hotel, still technically separated from James. Apparently he's made several overtures about reconciliation, all with Patricia orchestrating behind the scenes. And you haven't reached out?" I shook my head. "She knows where I am. The next move needs to be hers." After Gordon left, I lingered in my study, reviewing property assessments for a potential new acquisition in Cambridge. The autumn sunlight streamed through leaded glass windows, illuminating the room where Robert and I had spent countless evenings discussing ideas, planning family trips, dreaming futures that now existed only in memory. "What would you advise, Robert?" I asked aloud, a habit I'd never quite abandoned in the 7 years since his death. "How long do I wait? When does principled patience become stubborn pride?" The doorbell's chime interrupted my one-sided conversation. Through the window, I glimpsed an unfamiliar car in my driveway. Not Olivia's sleek Audi or James's ostentatious Mercedes, but a modest Honda Civic that had seen better days. I opened the door to find a young woman with a messenger bag slung across her chest and an apologetic expression. "Mrs. Montgomery? I'm Amanda Chen from the Boston Globe. I was hoping for a few minutes of your time." "I've already declined interview requests through appropriate channels," I replied, preparing to close the door. "This isn't about your investment strategies," she said quickly. "It's about Hamilton Foundation irregularities that have come to light since your identity as the anonymous donor was revealed." I paused, hand still on the door. "What irregularities?" Financial discrepancies in the education initiative your daughter managed. Significant amounts diverted from program services to administrative expenses that can't be fully accounted for. She pulled a folder from her bag. The foundation's internal audit was triggered by your revelation, and the findings are concerning enough that the board has placed the program director on administrative leave pending investigation. Olivia is on administrative leave? The information landed like a physical blow. Amanda nodded. Since Monday, the Globe is preparing an investigative piece, and I wanted to offer you the opportunity to comment before publication. I studied the young reporter's face, noting both professional determination and genuine discomfort at delivering this news. I appreciate the courtesy, but I have no comment at this time. I need to verify this information independently. Of course. She handed me her card. My deadline is tomorrow at 3 p.m. if you change your mind. After she left, I immediately called Gordon, who promised to make discreet inquiries through his contacts on the foundation board. Then I tried Eleanor, who confirmed she'd heard rumors about financial irregularities, but had no specific details. Have you spoken with Olivia directly? She asked. No. I just learned about this from a reporter at my door. Eleanor's sigh carried through the phone. Financial journalism moves faster than family reconciliation, it seems. Would you like me to reach out to her? I could suggest she contact you before this becomes public. I considered the offer briefly before declining. No. If she wants my help, she needs to ask for it herself. After hanging up, I poured a small glass of Robert's favorite scotch, a ritual reserved for moments requiring particular clarity, and settled back into my study to wait for Gordon's call. The amber liquid warmed my throat as I contemplated this unexpected development. Could Olivia have actually misappropriated funds? The accusation seemed incongruous with the daughter I had raised, regardless of her recent moral flexibility regarding social positioning. Robert and I had emphasized ethical financial management from her earliest allowance, teaching transparent accountability alongside basic budgeting. Then again, the woman who had deliberately humiliated her mother to save face with social climbers was already far removed from the child we had raised with such care. The phone rang. Gordon, with preliminary findings. It's complicated, he began, never a reassuring opening. The audit shows approximately $380,000 in questionable allocations over the past 2 years, funds designated for scholarship disbursements that were redirected to program development expenses without proper documentation. That sounds potentially criminal, I said quietly. Potentially, he agreed, though there's significant ambiguity in the Foundation's approval processes that could provide reasonable defense. The more immediate concern is public perception. If the Globe runs this story, Olivia's professional reputation will be severely damaged, regardless of eventual findings. I thanked him for the information and promised to keep him updated on any developments. No sooner had I ended the call than my doorbell rang again. This time, the car in the driveway was instantly recognizable. Olivia's Audi, its sleek lines incongruous against the backdrop of my traditional New England home. When I opened the door, the woman standing on my porch barely resembled the polished, confident daughter who had orchestrated my humiliation at her wedding just weeks earlier. Olivia's face was drawn, her normally perfect hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail, her designer clothes replaced by jeans and a simple sweater. "Mom," she said, her voice catching, "I need your help." The plea, so direct, so unlike her carefully constructed approaches of recent years, momentarily disarmed me. I stepped back, wordlessly inviting her inside. In my kitchen, I busied myself making tea while Olivia sat at the breakfast table, fingers nervously shredding a paper napkin. The familiar ritual provided necessary moments to collect my thoughts, to consider how to navigate this unexpected crossroads. "The Globe contacted you," she said finally. Not a question, but a resigned statement. "About an hour ago." I placed a steaming mug before her, then took the seat opposite. "Would you like to tell me what's happening?" Olivia's hands trembled slightly as she wrapped them around the mug. "I didn't steal anything, Mom. I need you to believe that." "I'm listening," I said carefully, neither confirming belief nor expressing doubt. And so she began, a tangled explanation of foundation politics, budget pressures, and administrative decisions that had seemed reasonable in the moment but looked increasingly problematic under audit scrutiny. "James's father joined the board last year," she explained. He suggested we could optimize program efficiency by reallocating some scholarship funds to development initiatives that would ultimately attract more donors. What kind of development initiatives? I asked. She hesitated. Primarily relationship cultivation events, galas, private dinners with potential major donors, exclusive retreats for board members and prospects. In other words, social functions that enhanced the Whitman's networking opportunities while reducing actual services to students, I translated. Olivia flinched, but didn't contradict this assessment. William assured me it was standard practice in foundation management, that the reallocation had board approval through the executive committee. Did you get that approval in writing? Her silence answered my question. The foundation is claiming $380,000 cannot be properly accounted for, I said quietly. That's not a minor bookkeeping error, Olivia. The money went to foundation activities, she insisted, but some of the documentation is incomplete. And now that William has resigned from the board citing personal reasons, there's no one backing my version of events. The picture was becoming clearer. My daughter manipulated by experienced operators who had now neatly extricated themselves, leaving her to face consequences alone. Whether she had been willfully blind or genuinely deceived remained unclear, but the practical outcome was the same. Why did you wait until now to come to me? I asked. The Globe is publishing tomorrow. The foundation placed you on leave days ago. Tears welled in her eyes. I was ashamed, she whispered. After how I treated you at the wedding. After everything, I didn't think I had the right to ask for your help. The admission, raw and unadorned with her usual justifications, caught me off guard. Before I could respond, she continued, words tumbling out as if a dam had broken. I've made such a mess, Mom, of everything. The foundation, my marriage, our relationship. She looked up, tears now flowing freely. I don't even recognize myself anymore. How did I become someone who would seat her own mother at a back table and spread lies about her to save face with people who don't actually care about me? The question hung between us, Olivia seemingly asking it of herself as much as of me. In her distress, I glimpsed something I had feared lost, genuine self-reflection, the capacity for moral reckoning that Robert and I had tried so carefully to nurture. What do you want from me, Olivia? I asked gently. She wiped her tears with the shredded napkin. Advice? Perspective? Maybe forgiveness eventually, though I know I haven't earned it yet. The qualification, the acknowledgement that forgiveness was not an entitlement but something to be earned through changed behavior, signaled a shift I hadn't dared hope for just hours earlier. The first step, I said carefully, is complete transparency. I need to understand exactly what happened with the foundation funds before I can help navigate what comes next. Olivia nodded, visibly gathering her courage. I'll tell you everything. No more half-truths, no more excuses. As she began a more detailed account, I studied my daughter's face, still beautiful despite exhaustion and tears, but somehow more authentic than I had seen it in years. The carefully constructed mask had slipped, revealing the vulnerable human beneath the polished exterior. Whether this represented a genuine turning point or merely a tactical pivot born of desperation remained to be seen. But as autumn sunlight filled my kitchen and my only child finally, haltingly began speaking her truth, I allowed myself to feel something I had almost abandoned in recent weeks: hope. The next 3 days unfolded in a whirlwind of crisis management. I brought in my own forensic accountant to review foundation records independently before involving Gordon and his legal team. The findings painted a complex picture, not outright embezzlement as initially implied, but a troubling pattern of administrative overreach and inadequate financial controls. The good news, Gordon explained during our strategy meeting in my study, is that most funds can be traced to legitimate foundation activities, albeit with questionable prioritization. The problematic spending was approved just through irregular channels primarily controlled by William Whitman during his tenure on the executive committee. Olivia, seated beside me on the leather sofa, nodded miserably. He assured me everything was properly authorized. I should have verified independently. Yes, you should have, I agreed, neither sugarcoating nor condemning. But intent matters in both legal and ethical considerations. Were you knowingly misappropriating funds? No, she insisted. I believed the reallocations were approved and strategically sound, based on William's guidance. I was negligent in my oversight, not deliberately deceptive. Gordon made some final notes before closing his portfolio. The foundation seems amenable to our proposed resolution. Full documentation of all expenditures, repayment of funds that can't be properly accounted for, and your resignation effective immediately. Resignation rather than termination makes a significant difference for your professional future, I added, seeing Olivia's expression fall further. I understand, she said quietly. It's fair, more than fair, considering the alternatives. After Gordon departed, Olivia remained on the sofa, staring at the family photographs lining my bookshelves. I've lost everything in 3 weeks, she said finally. My marriage, my career, my reputation, all because I wanted so desperately to be accepted by people who abandoned me the moment things got difficult. The observation contained no self-pity, only a dawning recognition that seemed genuine. Not everything is lost, I corrected gently. You're 35, Olivia. This is a significant setback, but hardly the end of your story. She turned to me, vulnerability plain on her face. Why are you helping me? After what I did to you at the wedding, the lies I spread, you have every right to let me face this alone. The question deserved thoughtful consideration, rather than a reflexive maternal response. I took a moment before answering. I'm helping, because beneath the woman who seated me at that back table, I believe my daughter still exists, I said finally. The child Robert and I raised with values of integrity, compassion, and authenticity. I see glimpses of her returning, in your willingness to acknowledge mistakes without deflection, in your commitment to transparency during this process. Tears welled in her eyes. I'm not sure I deserve that faith. Perhaps not yet, I acknowledged. But as your father always said, we don't help people because they deserve it. We help because it's who we choose to be. The mention of Robert brought a fresh wave of emotion to her face. Dad would be so disappointed in me. Yes, I agreed, offering truth rather than comfort. But he would also recognize genuine remorse when he saw it, and believe in the possibility of redemption through changed behavior. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of absent presence filling the space between us. Then Olivia spoke again, her voice small but clear. I've been staying at the Harbor Hotel because I couldn't face returning to the house I shared with James. Not after realizing how quickly our relationship transformed from romantic partnership to financial alliance. She hesitated. Would it be possible? Could I stay here for a while? Just until I figure out next steps? The request surprised me, not because of its practical nature, but because it represented a willingness to return to a simpler existence, to the childhood home she had so eagerly left behind for more prestigious surroundings. Your room is as you left it, I replied. You're welcome to stay as long as needed. Relief flooded her features, followed quickly by determination. I'll contribute to household expenses from my savings, and I'll start job hunting immediately, though I'm not sure who would hire me after the foundation situation becomes public. One step at a time, I advised. Let's resolve the current crisis before planning too far ahead. Later that evening, after helping Olivia settle into her old room, I found myself drawn to Robert's study, the space I had preserved almost exactly as he left it, from the worn leather chair to the dog-eared philosophy books lining the shelves. I often retreated here when facing difficult decisions, finding clarity in the lingering essence of his thoughtful presence. She's home, I said softly to the empty room. Broken, humbled, but perhaps more authentically herself than she's been in years. What do I do now, Robert? How do I support her recovery without enabling further irresponsibility? No answer came, of course, but the act of articulating my concerns aloud helped organize my thoughts. This unexpected reunion with my daughter walked a delicate line between necessary accountability and compassionate support. Too much of either would unbalance the healing process we had tentatively begun. The following morning, I found Olivia already awake, seated at the kitchen table with her laptop open to job search sites. I've been thinking about next steps, she said as I prepared coffee. Most of my experience is in nonprofit development, but that door is likely closed given the circumstances. I'm considering completely different directions, maybe teaching or corporate social responsibility. I nodded, encouraged by her practical approach rather than despair. Your skills are transferable to many contexts, and this setback, while serious, doesn't define your entire professional identity. She closed her laptop with a sigh. The Globe article comes out today. I should prepare for the fallout. We've provided them with accurate information about the resolution process, I reminded her. The narrative will be one of administrative oversight failures rather than criminal misconduct. Still, she said grimly, my name will be permanently associated with financial impropriety. Everything I've worked for, gone. Not gone, I corrected. Transformed. This experience will either defeat you or become the foundation for something more authentic. The choice is yours. She considered this, absently tracing patterns on the wooden tabletop with her fingertip. When did you become so wise, Mom? I've always been wise, I replied with a small smile. You just stopped listening for a while. The comment earned a rueful laugh, the first genuine lightness I'd heard from her since before the wedding. Fair point. As we finished breakfast, Olivia hesitated before asking, would it be all right if I came with you to your office today? I could help with administrative tasks, filing, anything really. I just need to feel useful while waiting for the article to drop. The request revealed another shift, Olivia seeking purpose through service rather than status, practical contribution rather than prestige. I agreed, and within the hour, she was organizing files in my home office while I conducted video conferences with property managers. The Globe article appeared online at noon, factual, measured, and largely aligned with the narrative our legal team had provided. Olivia was portrayed not as a criminal, but as an inexperienced executive who had deferred too readily to board guidance without proper verification. The Foundation's swift resolution process, including full repayment of questionable expenditures, featured prominently in the conclusion. It could have been much worse, Gordon commented when he called to discuss the coverage. The repayment detail was particularly helpful in shaping public perception. What he tactfully didn't mention was that I had personally covered the $380,000 repayment, not to rescue Olivia from consequences, but to protect scholarship recipients from program disruptions while the foundation reorganized. My daughter would eventually repay me through a structured arrangement that Gordon had drafted, with reasonable terms that acknowledged her changed financial circumstances without enabling dependency. By evening, Olivia had received 8 text messages and 3 emails from former colleagues and friends, some offering genuine support, others thinly veiled curiosity disguised as concern. Most tellingly, nothing from James or his family. Convenient how they've all disappeared, she observed, setting her phone aside with newfound clarity. The Whitmans cultivated my ambition when it served their purposes, then vanished the moment accountability arrived. People reveal themselves in difficult moments, I noted, both positively and negatively. She nodded, thoughtful. I'm beginning to understand why you kept your financial situation private all these years. You wanted to know who valued you for yourself rather than your resources. Precisely. I was touched by her insight, this evidence of emerging wisdom from painful experience. I wish I had recognized that sooner, she said softly, before I became someone who measured others by their utility rather than their character. The self-awareness in her observation, honest, unvarnished, without expectation of praise for the recognition, suggested healing had truly begun. Not complete reconciliation, not yet, but the essential foundation of truth on which authentic relationship could potentially be rebuilt. As darkness fell outside my windows, I found myself experiencing something unexpected amidst the ongoing challenges, a quiet contentment. My daughter was home, facing difficult truths with emerging courage. The path forward remained uncertain, full of necessary reckonings and inevitable setbacks. But for the first time since Robert's death, I felt the fabric of family beginning to reweave itself, not in the old patterns that had ultimately proven unsustainable, but in new configurations built on hard-won honesty and the humility that comes only through genuine accountability. It was, I reflected as I watched Olivia move through the familiar rooms of her childhood home with newfound appreciation, a beginning worth nurturing. 3 months passed with Olivia living in my home, a period of adjustment for us both. The daughter who had once viewed my traditional colonial house as embarrassingly outdated now moved through its rooms with quiet appreciation, noticing details she had previously overlooked or dismissed. The hand-carved moldings, the leaded glass cabinets, the comfortable solidity of furniture chosen for longevity rather than fashion. I never realized how peaceful it is here, she commented one evening as we shared tea in the sunroom. No wonder you never wanted to move to a more prestigious neighborhood. This house has witnessed our family history, I replied simply. Some things have value beyond market assessment. These months brought practical changes as well. Olivia had secured a position teaching business ethics at a local community college, a profound shift from her previous high-profile role, but one she approached with unexpected enthusiasm. These students are so different from the people I used to cultivate as donors, she told me after her first week. They're working multiple jobs, raising families, genuinely determined to improve their circumstances through education rather than connections. It's humbling. More surprising than her career pivot was her handling of the divorce proceedings. James had finally filed papers after attempts to reconcile and regain proximity to my financial resources had failed. His initial settlement proposal had been breathtakingly aggressive, claiming entitlement to assets far beyond reasonable division. He wants half the value of our Beacon Hill townhouse, though his parents provided the down payment as a gift that suddenly has strings attached, Olivia explained during a consultation with Gordon. Plus liquidation of our joint investments, most of which came from my foundation salary that he now characterizes as misappropriated funds. Gordon raised his eyebrows. That's remarkably opportunistic, even by divorce proceeding standards. What impressed me was not Olivia's justified indignation, but her subsequent approach. Rather than engaging in protracted legal battles, she offered a settlement that prioritized clean separation over financial maximization. I'll relinquish any claim to the townhouse if he drops demands for my retirement accounts, she decided. I'd rather start fresh with less than remain entangled through years of litigation. This preference for integrity over advantage, for simplicity over acquisition, represented transformation beyond mere circumstantial adaptation. The daughter who had once demanded a $150,000 wedding was now willingly surrendering property rights to expedite ethical disentanglement. On a crisp December morning, with light snow dusting the garden, I found Olivia at the kitchen table surrounded by spreadsheets, not foundation budgets, but personal financial planning documents. I'm creating a repayment schedule for the foundation reimbursement, she explained, as I joined her with coffee. Based on my new salary and reduced expenses, I should be able to repay you within 5 years, without interest. The terms Gordon drafted allow 7 years, I reminded her. I know, but I'd prefer to accelerate if possible. She met my gaze directly. It's important to me to make this right, not just legally, but personally. I nodded, recognizing the significance of this commitment. I appreciate that, but I don't want financial strain to prevent you from eventually establishing independent living again. She gestured toward her carefully constructed budget. I've accounted for saving toward a modest apartment deposit while maintaining the repayment schedule. It won't be Beacon Hill, but it will be mine. Truly mine, not financed through status obligations or family connections. The maturity in her planning, practical, realistic, ethically grounded, contrasted sharply with her previous approach to financial matters. Whether this represented permanent transformation or temporary adaptation to reduced circumstances remained uncertain, but the effort itself deserved acknowledgement. You've changed, I observed. Olivia's expression turned reflective. The foundation investigation was professionally devastating, but personally clarifying. When everything external was stripped away, career, marriage, social position, I had to confront who I'd become without those identifiers. She traced the edge of a spreadsheet with her fingertip. I didn't particularly like that person, Mom. The admission held no self-pity, only clear-eyed assessment. Who are you becoming now? I asked. She considered the question thoughtfully. Someone who measures success differently. Someone who values substance over appearance. Someone who's learning to recognize authentic connection. A small smile. Someone more like you, perhaps. The comparison touched me deeply, but I maintained perspective. The journey matters more than the destination, Olivia. Sustained change happens through daily choices, not declarations of intent. I know, she acknowledged. That's why I'm focusing on practical rebuilding rather than dramatic gestures. Teaching classes that matter. Creating a sustainable budget. Establishing healthy boundaries. She hesitated before adding, earning back your trust through consistency rather than expecting instant forgiveness. This last observation reflected perhaps the most significant shift, recognition that reconciliation required patient rebuilding rather than convenient absolution. Our conversation was interrupted by the doorbell. When I answered, I found Eleanor Whitman on my porch, elegant despite her 90 years and the light snow falling around her. Catherine, she greeted me warmly. I hope I'm not intruding. Never, I assured her, welcoming her inside. What brings you out in this weather? Information I thought might interest you both, she replied, glancing toward Olivia, who had appeared in the hallway. May we sit? Over tea in the living room, Eleanor shared developments from the Whitman family sphere, information gathered through her impressive network of sources. James has accepted a position with his father's firm, though with considerably less authority than initially promised, she began. The foundation situation raised concerns about his judgment, particularly his failure to maintain appropriate distance from administrative decisions his father was influencing. Olivia absorbed this news without visible reaction, a marked change from her previous investment in James's professional standing. William's maneuvering has had unexpected consequences as well, Eleanor continued. The Foundation Board has initiated a comprehensive governance review, resulting in several resignations beyond his own. Patricia's social capital has diminished considerably. 3 charity boards have quietly suggested she focus on other priorities rather than leadership roles. The ripple effects of accountability, I observed. Eleanor nodded. Indeed, systems of mutual protection function only when consequences remain theoretical. Once actual scrutiny occurs, the infrastructure often collapses with remarkable speed. She turned to Olivia with unexpected gentleness. I thought you should know that William has been characterizing you as the primary responsible party in private conversations, claiming you misled him about program allocations and approval processes. Rather than defensiveness or outrage, Olivia's response reflected measured assessment. That's disappointing but not surprising. He's protecting himself at my expense, just as he did throughout the Foundation relationship. You seem remarkably composed about this betrayal, Eleanor noted. 3 months ago, I would have been devastated, Olivia acknowledged. Now it simply confirms what I've gradually accepted, that the connections I valued so highly were conditional and strategic rather than genuine. Eleanor studied her appraisingly. You've changed, my dear. So I'm told, Olivia replied with a small smile toward me. Though the real test isn't acknowledging past mistakes, but building something better moving forward. After Eleanor departed, Olivia returned to her financial planning, while I prepared dinner, a simple domestic rhythm we had established in recent weeks. As I chopped vegetables, I found myself reflecting on Eleanor's visit and its significance beyond the information shared. The elderly matriarch could have communicated the Whitman family developments through a phone call. Her decision to visit in person, to include Olivia in the conversation rather than speaking solely to me, represented deliberate inclusion, a gesture of respect toward my daughter despite her complicated history with Eleanor's family. More telling was Olivia's reception of this gesture, grateful but not desperate for approval, interested but not defined by the Whitmans' circumstances, informed but not controlled by their narratives. The emotional distance she maintained while receiving Eleanor's information demonstrated boundaries previously absent in her approach to social hierarchy. As we sat down to dinner that evening, Olivia raised her water glass in a simple toast. To new foundations, she said, built on truth rather than appearances. I touched my glass to hers, recognizing the multiple meanings in her words: personal foundations of character, relational foundations of authenticity, practical foundations of ethical rebuilding. The path ahead remained uncertain, with inevitable challenges and necessary reckonings still to come. But watching my daughter approach her transformed circumstances with emerging wisdom and hard-won clarity, I allowed myself to believe that this time, the changes taking root might actually endure. Not because they were dramatic or publicly visible, but precisely because they weren't, because they were manifesting in quiet daily choices, practical adjustments, and the sustained effort of becoming someone she could respect when no one was watching. The true measure of transformation. Spring arrived with characteristic New England hesitation. Warm days interspersed with stubborn cold snaps, tender buds appearing on trees only to be threatened by late frosts. As the garden gradually awakened, so too did new dimensions in my relationship with Olivia. 6 months had passed since her return to my home. The initial crisis management had given way to steady rebuilding, her teaching position becoming a source of genuine fulfillment, her divorce proceedings concluding with surprising efficiency once she prioritized clean separation over maximum financial advantage, her repayment schedule maintained with disciplined consistency. Most importantly, Our interactions had evolved beyond the careful politeness of early reconciliation into something approaching authentic connection. We disagreed sometimes, expressed conflicting perspectives, even occasionally irritated each other as any two adults sharing living space might. But these natural tensions existed within a framework of fundamental respect, previously absent from our relationship. On a mild April morning, I was reviewing quarterly investment reports in my study when Olivia appeared in the doorway, her expression uncharacteristically nervous. "Do you have a moment?" she asked. "There's something I need to discuss." I set aside my work, gesturing toward the chair opposite my desk. "Of course. Is everything all right?" She sat, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Yes, and no. It's complicated." She took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant." The announcement hung in the air between us, entirely unexpected. I measured my response carefully, aware that my initial reaction would matter. "I see," I said gently. "How are you feeling about this?" "Overwhelmed," she admitted. It wasn't planned. James and I had discussed children theoretically, but always as some future consideration after achieving certain career milestones. "When did you discover this?" "3 days ago. I've been processing before telling anyone." She met my gaze directly. "You're the first person I've told." The significance of this wasn't lost on me, that she had chosen to share this fundamental life development with me before anyone else, a profound shift from our previous relational distance. "How far along are you?" I asked. "About 10 weeks according to the doctor. It must have happened just before." She trailed off, but I understood the unspoken timeline, just before the wedding. Before the public humiliation, the foundation investigation, the separation. Before everything changed. "Does James know?" She shook her head. "The divorce was finalized last month. We haven't spoken directly since the settlement conference." I considered the implications carefully. "Do you plan to tell him?" "Eventually, yes. He has a right to know, regardless of our circumstances." Her hands remained tightly clasped. "But first, I needed to figure out my own position. What I want. What I'm capable of handling. And what have you decided?" I kept my tone neutral, offering neither direction nor judgment. Olivia straightened her shoulders slightly. "I'm keeping the baby. It's not ideal timing, and certainly not the circumstances I would have chosen. My career is in transition, my finances recovering, my personal life completely restructured." A small, determined smile appeared. "But despite everything, this feels right, important, somehow." I nodded, respecting her clarity while acknowledging the challenges ahead. "Single parenthood is difficult under any circumstances. With your specific situation—" "I know," she interrupted. "Professionally precarious, financially rebuilding, living with my mother at 35. Not exactly the stability most parenting books recommend." "That wasn't what I was going to say," I corrected gently. "I was going to observe that your specific situation actually contains unique advantages. You've recently rediscovered core values that will serve you well as a parent. You're establishing financial responsibility that will benefit your child, and you have support that many single parents lack." Surprise flickered across her face. "You're not disappointed or concerned about complications with James and his family?" "Those considerations are secondary to the fundamental reality," I replied. "You're having a child, my grandchild. Everything else we can navigate together if that's what you want." The simple affirmation released something in Olivia, tension she had carried since entering the room. Tears welled in her eyes. "I was so afraid to tell you," she confessed. "After everything I've put you through, to add this complexity." "Life is complex," I said simply. "Children especially so. But they're also clarifying. They have a way of distilling priorities to their essence." She wiped away tears with the back of her hand. "I have so many practical concerns. Health insurance through the community college only covers basic prenatal care. My salary barely covers my current expenses, let alone childcare costs. The repayment schedule, one step at a time," I advised. "Some adjustments may be necessary, but the fundamental commitment remains unchanged. We'll figure out the logistics together." As Olivia left to prepare for her afternoon classes, I remained in my study, absorbing this unexpected development. A grandchild, something I had occasionally imagined during Olivia's marriage to James, but always in a context of wealth and privilege that now seemed foreign to our current reality. Robert would have been overjoyed, regardless of circumstances. He had always wanted grandchildren, had joked about spoiling them in ways we had deliberately avoided with Olivia herself. The thought of him missing this chapter brought familiar sadness, but also a renewed sense of purpose. I would witness this journey for both of us. Later that evening, as we walked through the garden inspecting early spring growth, Olivia broached a subject I had been carefully avoiding. "I need to tell James," she said, pausing beside a rose bush showing its first green shoots. "Legally, ethically, he should know." "I agree," I replied, though his response may complicate matters. She nodded, clearly having considered this. Best case scenario, he acknowledges paternity, but remains minimally involved, perhaps providing some financial support. Worst case, he involves his family, challenges custody arrangements, uses the pregnancy as leverage to revisit divorce settlements. I completed her thought. The Whitmans tend to view children as assets and liabilities rather than people. Exactly. She touched a tender leaf unfurling on the rosebush. But regardless of potential complications, transparency matters. I don't want to begin parenthood with deliberate concealment, even if openness creates difficulties. The ethical clarity in her reasoning, prioritizing integrity over convenience, long-term values over short-term advantage, demonstrated transformation far more convincing than any verbal assertions of change could have. "When will you tell him?" I asked. "Tomorrow. I've asked to meet at a coffee shop near his office. Neutral territory, public setting." She smiled wryly. "I've learned something about strategic communications these past months. Would you like me to accompany you?" "Not to participate," I clarified, "but simply to be available nearby if needed." She considered this before shaking her head. "Thank you, but no. This is a conversation I need to handle independently. Part of establishing my new boundaries involves managing difficult interactions without relying on external support." Again, her approach reflected thoughtful intention rather than reactive emotion, another marker of genuine growth. That night, I found myself unable to sleep, my mind cycling through implications of Olivia's pregnancy beyond the immediate practical considerations. This child would enter a complex family landscape, born of parents whose brief marriage had collapsed spectacularly, potentially connected to grandparents who valued status above character. Yet, among these complications lay opportunity as well, the chance for Olivia to parent according to the values she was rediscovering rather than those she had temporarily embraced. The possibility of relationships built on authenticity rather than advantage from the very beginning. And for me, the unexpected gift of witnessing new life emerge from painful reckonings. A tangible reminder that endings often contain beginnings within them, waiting to unfold in their own time. As dawn lightened the sky outside my window, I finally drifted towards sleep with a sense of cautious optimism. Whatever challenges lay ahead, this child would be welcomed with clear-eyed love, not the carefully curated perfection Olivia had once pursued, but the messy, authentic connection that constitutes true family bonds. Perhaps, I reflected as consciousness faded, that was the most valuable inheritance we could possibly provide. "It's a girl," Olivia announced, returning from her 20-week ultrasound appointment. Her face glowed with a combination of excitement and quiet wonder as she handed me the grainy black and white image. Completely healthy according to all measurements. I studied the profile captured in the sonogram, the distinct curve of a tiny nose, the delicate outline of a forehead, the small hand seemingly raised in greeting. "My granddaughter. She's beautiful," I said, emotion catching in my throat. "The technician said she's very active, wouldn't stay still for the measurements." Olivia smiled. "Stubborn already." "A family trait," I observed wryly, returning the image. Olivia's pregnancy had progressed without medical complications, though the surrounding circumstances remained complex. James's response to the news had been predictably self-interested. Initial shock followed by immediate consultation with his family's attorneys regarding obligations and rights. "He doesn't want active involvement in parenting," Olivia had reported after their tense coffee shop meeting. "But he's concerned about financial responsibilities and how this might affect his new relationship." New relationship, barely 3 months after their divorce was finalized. The revelation had stung Olivia briefly before she recognized the pattern it confirmed. "He's already dating a senior vice president at his father's bank," she'd explained with surprising equanimity. "Someone Patricia apparently introduced him to at a charity function in February." The Whitmans' approach to the pregnancy had evolved from initial wariness to strategic consideration once they processed its implications. William and Patricia had requested a formal meeting, complete with their attorney, to discuss mutual expectations and arrangements. They want to establish visitation rights and influence without actual caregiving responsibilities, Olivia summarized afterward. Essentially, treating grandparenthood as another social position to be managed rather than a relationship to be nurtured. Rather than engaging in emotional reaction, she had responded with composed clarity. I welcome appropriate grandparent involvement based on genuine connection with the child, but not as a negotiated legal arrangement. Relationship can't be contractually enforced. This balanced approach, neither vindictively excluding them nor naively accepting superficial terms, demonstrated discernment previously absent in her interactions with the Whitman family. She was establishing boundaries based on her child's well-being rather than social advantage or retribution. Meanwhile, practical preparations continued. The third bedroom in my home, previously used as additional storage, was gradually transformed into a nursery, painted a gentle sage green rather than the pink or blue Olivia once would have insisted upon as gender appropriate. I want her surrounded by nature tones, she explained, as we assembled a simple white crib purchased second-hand from a faculty colleague. Colors that calm and center rather than overstimulate. The nursery furnishings reflected Olivia's transformed priorities. Quality where it mattered for safety and function. Simplicity where elaborate features would serve only appearance. No designer showcase for social media, but a thoughtfully arranged space for a child's actual needs. Most telling was her approach to the baby registry, created at her teaching colleagues' insistence when they organized a modest shower. I've listed only essentials, she told me, showing the carefully curated selection online. Practical items we'll genuinely use, nothing for display or status, and I've included options at various price points so no one feels pressured beyond their means. This consideration for others' financial circumstances, once entirely absent from her awareness, represented perhaps the most significant evidence of her shifting perspective. As summer progressed, Olivia's body changed along with our living arrangements. We established rhythms that respected both shared space and individual needs. Meals often taken together, but mornings and evenings allocated to personal routines. Household responsibilities distributed according to energy and availability rather than rigid assignment. I never realized how comfortable this house could be, Olivia remarked one evening, as we sat on the back porch, watching fireflies appear in the garden dusk. When I was younger, I was always so eager to escape to somewhere more impressive, more aligned with my aspirations. And now? I asked. She rested her hand on her growing belly, thoughtful. Now I understand that comfort comes from alignment between internal and external realities, from living truthfully rather than performatively. A small smile. It took losing everything I thought I wanted to recognize what actually matters. On a warm August afternoon, as Olivia's due date approached, an unexpected visitor arrived at our door. Eleanor Whitman, elegant as always despite the summer heat, carrying a small package wrapped in simple cream paper. I hope I'm not intruding, she said when I welcomed her inside. I wanted to bring something for the baby and to check on Olivia's well-being. In the living room, Eleanor regarded my daughter with genuine warmth. You look radiant, my dear. How are you feeling? Enormous and impatient, Olivia replied with candor that would have been unthinkable in her previous interactions with James's grandmother. But otherwise well. The doctor says everything is progressing normally. I'm delighted to hear it. Eleanor handed her the package. This isn't on any registry, but I thought you might appreciate it nonetheless. Olivia unwrapped the gift carefully to reveal a small wooden box containing a silver rattle, beautifully crafted, but noticeably worn with age. This was James's when he was an infant, Eleanor explained. Before that, his father's, and before that, my husband's. 4 generations of history. She held Olivia's gaze. I wanted your daughter to have it, regardless of complicated family circumstances. The gesture, acknowledging the baby's legitimate place in family lineage despite the fractured relationship between her parents, brought unexpected tears to Olivia's eyes. Thank you, she said simply. This means a great deal. I wish I could promise more consistent involvement from my son and daughter-in-law, Eleanor said with characteristic directness. but their approach to family has always prioritized appearance over substance. I've made my own peace with that limitation, but I wanted you to know that at least one Whitman recognizes your child's rightful connection to our family history. After Eleanor departed, Olivia sat quietly, holding the silver rattle, its surface reflecting afternoon sunlight. "I never expected this," she admitted. Authentic kindness from the Whitman family seemed impossibly remote after everything that happened. "Eleanor has always operated from different values than her son and daughter-in-law," I observed. "Perhaps this baby offers opportunity for connection based on something more meaningful than social positioning." Olivia nodded, carefully returning the rattle to its box. "I want my daughter to understand both sides of her heritage, the complexity, the contradictions, the full truth rather than a sanitized version. That includes acknowledging genuine gestures of goodwill alongside recognizing problematic patterns. The nuanced perspective, neither idealizing nor demonizing the Whitmans, but seeing them clearly while maintaining appropriate boundaries, demonstrated emotional maturity I had once feared my daughter might never develop. 2 weeks later, after 18 hours of labor that tested both our endurance, Catherine Eleanor Montgomery entered the world, 7 pounds, 4 ounces of determined new life, named for both her grandmothers, despite the complicated family landscape she was born into. As I held my granddaughter for the first time, her tiny hand wrapping instinctively around my finger, I felt the full circle of our family story with visceral clarity. The wedding that had revealed painful truths, the public humiliation that had precipitated necessary reckonings, the foundation scandal that had stripped away pretense. All these difficult passages had somehow led to this moment of authentic beginning. "She has your eyes," I told Olivia, who watched us from her hospital bed with exhausted radiance, "and your father's chin." "Poor child," Olivia said with a soft laugh. "Dad's stubbornness along with mine. She'll be unstoppable." "Perhaps that's exactly what she needs to be," I replied, given the complicated world she's inheriting. As autumn leaves began to turn outside the hospital window, I contemplated the journey that had brought us here, from bitter estrangement to tentative reconciliation to this new chapter of shared purpose. Not perfect, not without ongoing challenges and necessary boundaries, but grounded in something far more durable than the superficial connection we had maintained before. The truth, painful as it had been, had ultimately set us free, not just from mutual deception, but from the exhausting maintenance of appearances that had hollowed our relationship from within. In its place, something authentic had gradually taken root, nourished by difficult honesty and sustained effort rather than convenient pretense. And now this child, born into complexity but surrounded by clear-eyed love, offered the most precious opportunity of all, the chance to begin again with wisdom hard-won from painful experience, to parent from integrity rather than image, to value substance over status from the very beginning. As I returned little Catherine to her mother's arms, I felt Robert's presence more strongly than I had in years, not as painful absence, but as enduring influence. He would have loved this moment, this child, this opportunity for genuine connection. "She's perfect," Olivia whispered, cradling her daughter close. "Not perfect," I corrected gently. "Real, and that's infinitely more valuable." In that hospital room, with autumn light filtering through half-drawn blinds and new life breathing softly between us, the final pieces of reconciliation seemed to settle into place, not through dramatic declarations or ceremonial gestures, but through the quiet recognition of shared purpose transcending past wounds. We had traveled a long, difficult road to reach this point. The journey ahead would undoubtedly bring its own challenges, requiring continued vigilance against old patterns and ongoing commitment to hard-earned wisdom. But watching my daughter cradle my granddaughter with clear-eyed love rather than curated perfection, I allowed myself to fully embrace what had been gradually unfolding these past months. Some relationships, broken in the right ways, could heal into something stronger than their original form, not despite their fractures, but because of them, the repaired places ultimately becoming the strongest points in the new construction. The end.